So as it is Black History Month, we're looking for influential moments and people to learn from and learn about. Marian Anderson comes to mind. Someone you should definitely know. She was an opera singer and a civil rights activist who lived here in Philadelphia. Her former home is now the site of the Marian Anderson Museum, which sadly has been closed for 2 years after a flood. Sharaday Howard has talked with the folks at the museum throughout this whole ordeal. Sharaday, so good to see you and see you here in person.
Absolute pleasure to be here and see you in person.
All right, so take us back. 2 years ago is when, of course, most museums, pretty much all museums in the area shut down with the pandemic. But then just a month later, the Marian Anderson Museum got flooded. What happened at that point in time?
Okay, so unfortunately, no one was there to catch it when it happened. So the flood happened, and of course, no one was in the museum. So the staff, everybody was home. So all of that damage just sat until someone went to the museum and finally noticed it. So that, of course, that time made a difference. And by the time they got there, they recognized that there was just probably about 3 to 4 feet of water in the basement, on the first floor. So you're looking at damage to not only the structure of the home, but also the artifacts. And that's what's so heartbreaking.
Wow. You talked to the CEO, Jillian Patricia Pirtle, who told you how she discovered this.
Due to the pandemic, we had to shut down along with all of the other historical sites. I was checking on the museum and I noticed a shushing sound, and I was met with rushing gusts of water. We were left with over $40,000 in damage.
So it was just that devastating. The water happened. She walked into the building and she saw gushing water. Water was gushing from the ceiling, almost from the basement. So it was running up, it was running down. She pretty much thought that it was the end of the museum. And at that point, she was at the mercy of not just the water, but the community and the community's help.
Can you describe this house for us, this museum? It's where, in Graduate Hospital, that neighborhood right around there?
It's in Graduate Hospital. It's a little South Philly. It's a little bit, Rittenhouse. It's that wonderful in-between place where you go and it feels like it really is a home. It's still her home. So you walk in through the front door and you can feel not only the energy of the past, but the energy of the people who keep it up, the people who believe in not just who and what Marian Anderson stood for and what she did here in Philadelphia, but really want to keep that memory alive. So when all of this damage was done, it was a personal hit. So Jillian is also the president of the society. So the Marian Anderson Society, which is at this point desperate to find local help from politicians, from the community, from anybody who will give just a little bit. They had a GoFundMe in the very beginning. They raised probably about 25% of what they needed.
We have had a bit of community support coming together to start us off with a GoFundMe to get the water out of the museum. We had the conditions assessment report done with the help of the Preservation Alliance for Greater Philadelphia. We've had the support of Councilman Kenyatta Johnson II, Councilmatic District, who lended a very wonderful boost to us to try to get some of the funds to start with the repairs. And we are looking for any and all help and support. The community support is so vitally important. We cannot do this without the help of fundraising, community partners, and those who are willing to help us with Marian Anderson's restoration repairs to keep her legacy going.
They're still about 3/4 of the way away from their goal. And when you walk into the house, you can feel a little bit of that disappointment right now. So we're kind of excited about seeing it open because I think it'll bring life to the space. It'll bring life to the block again. It's just a row home. It's a row home where a family would have lived 100 years ago and pretty much had a similar experience to what they have now. You walk in, you have a neighbor to the right and to the left of you. You've got 2 floors up. You've got a basement that's modest. Everything's so modest. You would never expect that Marian Anderson would have lived in such a modest home and had such a big life and such big dreams and so much success. And you can see it in the artifacts, but the structure of the home is just like a regular Philadelphian.
I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing that if you ask the average person in Philadelphia right now, do you know who Marian Anderson is? Where have you heard of her before? They might talk about the award that so many prestigious entertainers have won and that's really widely recognized and is given out here. But the backstory to her, I went back before we did this and I rewatched part of the concert at the Lincoln Memorial and the whole backstory with the Daughters of the American Revolution. Can you, Shara, tell us a little bit more about Marian Anderson, why she's important, and what she contributed not just to this city, but the bigger picture of things that shaped America?
So this performance in D.C., it was enormous, not just because it was globally recognized, but as a black woman during an era in which being not just black, but being a woman was almost, in so many respects, a death sentence in certain parts of the country. And in D.C. and Philadelphia, there was a little bit more liberation. There was a little bit more of an ability to speak up and speak out. So she took those opportunities to speak out. And this was the first time a black woman did what she did on such a world stage. And she nailed it. She got up there and she nailed it. Everything that she was known for in terms of her voice, it was all present. But then she also spoke. And when she spoke, she had gravity behind that voice. And behind her message, it was about not only what Black Americans were experiencing, but what they hoped to have in the future. So she was about recognizing what existed in terms of Jim Crow, what existed in terms of racism in America and around the world. But she was also about the dream and believing that going forward things could change. So locally, she was not only always here and doing concerts here, but she made a point to come home and let people know that she was home and still really do a lot of community work at home and do a lot of activism at home. She spoke to local politicians, and she really put herself out there when a lot of women and a lot of Black people were being cut down just when they had a thought of it almost. It felt like the moment they thought about standing up, their knees were cut out from under them. Not only did she stand up, she stayed up.
I'm like, almost want to end it there because that was just so beautifully well said. But the way that you talk about Marian Anderson, I think mirrors what I heard in Jillian's voice when she was describing, she wasn't talking about Marian, but she was talking about what happened and being 3/4 short on what they need. And you can kind of hear, the emotion in her voice.
We are 3/4 short of the $491,000 that we need to fix this. So we only have 25% raised.
When you first talked to her a year ago, I think she said there were $40,000 in damages, and now they need to get almost $500,000. What happened in between there? Did it end up costing more than they thought? What made it go up so much?
So they got an assessment from the city. That's why you can hear the devastation in her voice. It went from something doable to something that seemed almost impossible. So $40,000 to almost $500,000. I mean, that goal that you talk about moving the needle. And the assessment not only went from the structure of the building, which really had taken a big hit, the floors, the foundation, so much things that you talk to anybody else and they look at the car and they say, it's totaled, you know? And she's looking at it going, it can't be totaled. This is not an option. So $500,000, okay, we're going for $491,000 and we're going to get it. So a couple of local politicians really did help, and the community came together. But you can hear when she says only 25%, you can hear the gulp in her voice of what's left. So now with regard to the assessment, they're saying, oh, no, we need a whole lot more than that.
Wow. And do you think, so she talks about the community support and that we really need community support. They've had some help. Do you think she feels like disappointed that the community hasn't done more? Or has this really been an effort of, we are doing everything we can do, we're just still working to get there?
The latter. I think, and she would love to say that the average Philadelphian has money to give right now. Right. But we look to the left and to the right of us, and everybody's struggling right now. She can't ask for, she can't get blood from a stone. She recognizes that. But she also expected on some level for not only the assessment to be not what it was, maybe, I'm not going to assume, but when the assessment came in and then she recognized that all the community really did give. They gave what they had, and then there was still so much more that was needed. I don't think she's disappointed in the community. She's disappointed in the fact that it happened at all.
Maybe I just wasn't old enough to appreciate something like this earlier in my life, but I feel like more and more recently, you're hearing of things that happened in past generations where keeping the memory or the significance of what happened in the past alive is becoming more and more difficult, if what I'm saying is making sense. Like, I'm thinking back to Hadass Kuznets's coverage about Holocaust survivors. And I know you, Sharaday, did a profile on this awesome Philly jazz guitarist, Pat Martino. I mean, people who are getting older and older are also becoming fewer and fewer in number. Like, the people who lived and saw this greatness are fewer and fewer in number. They're not around as much anymore. So I'm wondering how we go about keeping the memory of these people alive. It just seems like this is something that from that generation, the early 20th century, it's becoming more and more of an issue as people from that era are less and less in number.
Right. And I think that statement is so strong because Philadelphia, we live in a place that is historic by nature. I mean, we are one of the cities that really, to me, is a city of firsts. So we can't let people forget not only the pivotal points in which things happen for the first time, but it's about the follow through as well. We not only were the first, but a lot of times we're responsible for maintaining things, whether it be grassroots politics or art and culture. There are a lot of things that Philadelphia's gravitas is really integral to with regard to America. American history really in so many levels is connected to Philadelphia history. So it's really important that we share this with the next generation and the next generation. But I think a lot of people know that, who said this? I don't remember who said this, but said it only takes one generation to lose all the ones before.
Mm.
So if you don't have those discussions with your kids, if you don't have those discussions with students, with youth, and kind of tap into that passion, not just about history, but about their own poignance with regard to history and what their family's connected to, what the street down, right down the street. Did you know right down there, Marian Anderson would come home from that DC concert and celebrate with over 30 of her friends from LA, from New York, from Philly. They were all here. So many people passed through that house that you walk by every day. That conversation needs to be had and the excitement needs to be reinstalled. So maybe that's the conversation that, that we can have, not just with ourselves, but with each other about, like, where's the passion for our own history?
I think about that all the time. And, a simple personal level of, like, I lost my grandparents when I was high school or early college. And I constantly think back, why didn't I talk to them more? Why didn't I hear their stories of growing up in this time period that I will never be able to see myself? So, talk to people, especially older people, share these stories. This is why we're having this conversation and sharing this story about Marian Anderson and hoping that people will listen and keep this alive. So in that light, this is the message. How can people help?
People can help by, of course, going to the Marian Anderson website. They have a GoFundMe. Please contribute to the GoFundMe. They also have a wonderful event happening at Penn Museum on the 13th. So February 13th, they're going to be going over some of the letters between Marian Anderson and her husband. So 60-year love affair that most people don't talk about. So this is really important for Black History Month and for Valentine's Day. So you can go support, get a little bit of education about not only what Marian Anderson contributed, but who she was as a person, what love means in the Black community and in the Philadelphia community, and how that extends itself through history. But then you can get a little bit more of a personal attachment to why it's so important to have the Marian Anderson Museum here. And then you can contribute in person, contribute online, just go. And they're hoping that in April, by the time they'll be able to get this place open in April. So reopening the museum in April is a goal. So maybe help them get there. If you can't do it now, do it in April to keep the doors open.
Awesome. That's great. The event at the Penn Museum sounds tremendous. Shara, we unfortunately don't get to talk to you that often, especially here in person, but you are a busy person in the KYW news operation, Bridging Philly, Artist Block. What else? What's on the docket these days?
Wow. You know what? They fill so much time, and I love it, but it's just talking to people one-on-one. I'm enjoying just getting on the street and talking to people about, hey, we just had this amazing water main break. Wow, that was crazy. Gushing water. And then the next moment you have Patricia Pirtle talking about what Marian Anderson has to contribute. And really, I can't complain. This is one of the best jobs in the world. Get to share time with you, get to put my feet on the ground and get busy. And Philly, hey, let's make it a John